Hello and welcome back. As in the title, this video has something to do with clamps. And today I'm going to be making some pipe clamps. But before we do that, let's have a quick chat about the clamps that I use in the shop. Now I do have a whole heap of these C clamps or G clamps, I guess depending where you are in the world. But we're not going to talk about those, we're going to talk about the clamps that I've made over the years here. First up, we have these green F clamps. Now these are big and heavy and sturdy, and I built these before I did videos for YouTube. But I did a Shopmade Tools and Upgrades video on these clamps, so if you want to know more information about these, there is that video, and I'll put the link in the description for that. But these clamps open out to about 780 millimeters, which is quite good, and I have used them quite a lot for clamping big things, particularly when you're building racks and things like that, or shelving. Next are these can't twist style clamps, and I've used these quite a lot. They've probably been seen in a lot of the videos as well. Very useful. They are a scissor clamp, so they squash together nice and evenly, and there's no twisting part that you have on the end, so that means that the work won't twist around when you're trying to clamp it down. You have those issues with G clamps or C clamps. So I have a pair of those. I only have one size, but as I said, they are quite handy in the shop. Then I've got these diamide style clamps. So again, these are scissor clamps run by a central lead screw down here. On these particular ones, they are left-handed and right-handed thread. And I actually have a video on these clamps. So if you want to know more about these clamps or see how they were made, then I'll leave that video link in the description as well. I have 4 of these fixture or table clamps. So these are quite useful. They fit down these holes in the bench here, and then you can clamp down on what you need there. A good thing about these clamps is that this top piece slides, so it can slide along if you need to come out a longer distance or a shorter distance. And you can also take that off, and if you're clamping something sideways, that can be put in the hole as well. So again, I have a video on building these clamps, so if you want more information about these clamps, then you can have a look at that video as well. Now, some of you might be thinking, what on earth are these clamps? These are similar to a G clamp or a C clamp, but they don't have a fixed end. It has an adjustable end here. I have had a few situations where I've needed to get around something wider and clamp in the middle. So a little bit like this. So I've got a wide piece of something and there's some cutaways maybe here, and I need to clamp this in the middle. So I can actually turn in both ends and the clamp has enough room to get around the wide part. Now, I don't use these very often, but when you're in that situation, they are really handy to have. Okay, that's enough chit-chat about the clamps I've made so far. Let's have a look at these pipe clamps. In the box, I have 2 types of clamps. Well, they're both bar clamps and they both fit the 3/4 inch pipe, but there are some differences here. So one's pretty obvious. This distance here is about 95 millimeters from the center of the pipe that you put in here to the end of the clamp. And this one here is about 57, 58 millimeters. So a lot shorter on that one there. And the way they connect to the pipe is a little bit different. This black one has the thread in the back jaw, I guess, whereas the orange one has the thread in the jaw that is wound in. Now, I don't know how much of a difference that's going to make in actually using the clamps, but we'll see as time goes by. And if you're wondering why I have two different types of clamps, well, I was going to say that's a funny story, but it's not that funny. These orange clamps came from Australia, and yes, it was cheaper for me to buy them in Australia, get them shipped all the way back to New Zealand, than to buy them locally in New Zealand. And I think at the time, these clamps here in New Zealand were about $50 for one clamp. And I presume half of you have fallen out of your armchairs, but sometimes things are expensive here. I bought a set of 4 for $130 or something like that. So I saved $70. Now when I look at the price, they're a lot cheaper. And I came about the black clamps from when I went to one of the places where I buy wood turning tools. And these were about $40 per clamp. And they had a special on at the time. And I think I got them for like, I don't know, $14 or $15 a clamp. They were really cheap. So I bought a bunch of those at the time. Anyway, I went on to Google and I tried to find out what the most common size of clamps are. And of course, all the answers were, well, it depends what you're making. If you're making big tables, then big long clamps are what you need. If you're making small things, then you make small clamps. So I have 18 clamps altogether, and I think I'm going to make 4 sets at 16 inches long, 10 sets at 24 inches. That was a really common size when looking on YouTube. And I'm going to make 4 sets at 40 inches. Now, if I do need longer clamps, what I'm going to do is I'm going to thread the pipe at both ends. And that means that if this was a clamp, a very short clamp, so it'll be longer than that. But if I needed it longer than what it is, I'll be able to take this piece off and put a connector on here, a pipe connector, and then put another piece of pipe with another threaded end, which will go on at the back here. And so I'll be able to extend these as much as I need to. And the reason for doing it like that is that I saw a lot of videos on YouTube and people have made like 60-inch clamps or something like that, and they use them very rarely. So instead of having a clamp just sitting around doing nothing, when I need a longer one, I'll be able to join one together. This is the cut list. I need 4 pieces at 11:30, 10 at 7:30, and 4 at 5:30. That allows for the extra where the clamp screws on. This piece of pipe is 4 meters long, and I mark it out here for our first cut. That piece is cut off. And of course, it's a bit of a rinse and repeat. All of the links are cut, and they're all laid out there on the table. I clean up the ends on each piece, and I put a bit of a chamfer to help with starting the threads. I set up the vise so that I can clamp the pipe firmly. Then we start the threading process. This pipe threading tool has been loaned to me from a friend. It's an old tool, but it's nice and solid. This tool was made in England. I needed to cut the threads in 2 passes. This is the first pass. Then I adjust the tool so that these lines line up. And that's the finish pass. Once the thread is cut, I try on one of the ends, and that works pretty good. Instead of changing the tool for each pipe, I'm going through and I'm cutting the first pass on each of the pipes. This is the last one for the first cut, and there is a short piece that I was going to thread. Then I think, I've got a better place for that in the scrap bin. After many hours, both ends of the pipes have had 2 passes on them, and I have tested the thread out with the threaded part of the pipe clamp. Now it's assembly time. There's our first victim, goes in the vise, and this part is screwed on. I actually do use a big crescent to make sure it's nice and tight. Then it's flipped around and the other part of the clamp is put on. That's the first one done, and we just go all the way through all the pipes. This is the last clamp to assemble, and that is put on the table with the rest of them. Now you can see that I have these inline couplers, so those are what I'll use to lengthen these pipe clamps if I need to. Now that I have all of these pipe clamps, where am I gonna put them? I lay out the clamps on the table, and the distance between them is about 65mm. I'm screwing the 1/2 inch plywood on top of the 7/8 plywood. Yep, I've got the wood in the mill. And I'm cutting through that 1/2 inch plywood only with a 55mm Forstner bit. This is the hole way down at one of the ends, and I was quite happy that I missed that screw. But in fact what happened is I measured it wrong, and I'm 5mm too far to the left on this side. So that was a bit of a cock up. Now I come through with a 30mm Forstner bit. That allows the pipe to slide in there. The pipe's about 28mm, so there's a couple of millimeters clearance. Now I'm down at the other end, and I've got to make the same cock up that I did last time to make it even, but this one is deliberate. So I'm marking out where the pipe will slide through, and these bits need to be cut out. Over to the bandsaw, and I only get halfway through here because the throat isn't big enough on the bandsaw. So then it's over to the vise and the handsaw to finish these off. These clamps have a foot on them, so that bit needs to be cut out as well. I separate this top piece off, then over on the bandsaw I cut those pieces out. I also need to file these edges off here for the clamps to sit in nicely. Now that the work is done on both pieces, these are glued together. I wipe off the excess glue. Now, only if I had a way of clamping this all together. Aha! I do. I put these 4 orange clamps on and one of the black ones. This piece needs to be glued to one of the other bits that I initially cut. And I bought a new toy that I'm going to use for the very first time. Okay, let's do it a different way. I clamp it together, line it all up, and then I drive in some screws. So the final part are these corner pieces to give it some support. And I'm quite happy that I do get to use the gun this time. Last time the brad nails in this gun were too short to go through all those pieces. This is how the clamps fit into those pockets. They fit quite nicely in there. Here's another angle from the front. And you put the clamp in and that will not come off. They're quite secure in there. So the last step here is to paint it, and I'm using some undercoat initially. Then I come back and put some top coat on. And this is just fence paint that I had in the garage. Now I'm drilling some holes in the top of the rack where this clamp holder will be bolted. That is bolted onto the top of the rack. And I use some nylock nuts on the back so that these bolts won't come loose. Finally, I get to load up the clamp holder with clamps. There's 4 orange ones and 5 of the black ones. That is one of the clamp holders on one of my shelving units. And this is the second clamp holder on a different shelving unit. The orange clamps in this case are the longest clamps. Well, I'm glad I've got onto that job and got it completed. I had a box of clamps sitting around for some time, and I had the pipe sitting up in the rafters of the garage for some time as well. So now all the clamps are together. I'll be able to use them when I start doing glue ups and other jobs that need to be clamped. I hope everyone has a great day, and once again, thanks for watching.